而家開始，咁就請我哋嘅秘書處同事安。
So we will now invite the deputations to enter the chamber. As we did in the first session, we are here today to discuss the question of childcare service, and we have many deputations present to give us their views on the subject of childcare service. Our stewards are now arranging for the deputations to come in. We have Dr. Chiu-hung, Secretary for Labor and Welfare, Ms. Vivian Ko, PAS, and Ms. Peng Kit Ling, Assistant Director, with us today. For this session, we have 30 individuals and deputations present, and the attendance list is already, shown on your screen. So they're here to express their views on the subject to the Bureau. So the deputations are now coming in. During the last session, we had questions raised by members regarding whether the government will increase the allowance for home-based carers and building more childcare centers in different districts, and these were the areas which we discussed in the first session. For the second session of this public hearing, we also have representatives from different walks of life. We also have children with us. The subject today is childcare service, and our secretariat has, very kindly helped to make arrangements to accommodate the deputations. So now that everybody is seated, we will now start the hearing. We will begin with Ms. Adelina Kung. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the study on the long-term development of childcare service, I would like to share 3 points. First of all, I don't agree with the government proposal about the manning ratio for children ranging from 0 to 3, 1 to 6, and then 2 to 7, 1 to 11. For 1 to 6, that is a manning ratio in the 1970s. As society develops and demand increases, the government is still lagging behind. So I'd like to propose for 0 to 2, or 0 to 1, the manning ratio is 1 to 3, 1 to 2 is 1 to 4. For those at the age of 2 to 3, the government is aligning it to the manning ratio of 1 to 11, but that is only apparent. For other than 1 to 11 manning ratio, there are 40% additional manpower provision. The long whole day kindergartens are sharing the burden of families with both parents working, and they offer service even around the clock, even when there are typhoons. For K1, the manning ratio is 1 to 8. For a child at 2 to 3, his or her emotional and psychological states will need to be taken care of. So 1 to 11, manning ratio 1 to 11 is not enough. The government proposes also providing relief the financial burden of parents, but and that there would be more additional resources. But there's no specific proposal. So for these self-funded childcare centers, the parents have to shoulder a heavy burden, and if they don't work just because they can't afford the fees, our society will suffer. Especially for the new low-income households, the government should not only pay for 20% of operating costs. Government may consider increasing its share to 40 to 50% so that they can share the burden with parents. and also for providing after-school custodial service. I think I can forewarn that there are problems. For children aged 2 to 3, they're not secondary school students, and after they finish with their schools, they will go next door, and that could not be a childcare center. And if the parents can, pick them up, it's all right. But if they stay in this, whole day, a long whole day kindergarten, the parents cannot pick them up. Even in when there's fine weather, a parent can only, take care of, 2 children at most. And the center may not be next to the kindergarten. So should any accidents happen, if the children will go missing or if they trip and fall, these things can happen. So what the government proposes is not a good proposal. I hope that you will, together with the Education Bureau, resume the planning for long whole day kindergartens. This is a really challenging public hearing, and the public watching this on television may find that we have some children who are crying. So I think
好，接住落嚟咧就係
this really highlights the different problems we are facing in terms of childcare service. I'm a parent and also a kindergarten teacher. I would like to use my 3 minutes to speak as a parent and a childcare carer. Now, the government is now relying too much on domestic helpers to relieve to resolve the problem of the shortage of childcare service. And the minimum wage for the domestic helper is $4,000 something. For many young households, they may not be able to afford that. And we all know that property prices are getting more and more expensive. Household sizes are becoming the premises become smaller and smaller, and they do not have room to accommodate a domestic helper. And very often, domestic helpers have to live in very confined spaces. So it's very important that we should expand the childcare service. And secondly, there is a keen demand for whole-day kindergartens or childcare centers. There's only one place for 20,000 odd people. The government is reluctant to provide figures regarding childcare centers. We don't know what the actual supply and demand situation. So this is a vicious circle. Many parents, because of the shortage of childcare service, refuse to give birth to children. Whereas in Singapore and UK, the government will provide support for households with young children, giving them an allowance or subsidy, but the government is not looking into that. The government lacks such an international perspective and failing to catch up with the international standard. There is a chronic shortage of places in these childcare centers. The report proposes the manning ratio for childcare center for 02 will be improved, but this is only going back to the standard of the 1970s. It's still very backward, and the welfare panel already endorsed a resolution that the manning ratio should be improved to 1 to 3.5. So that you can really take care of children with SENs. The government is going to gradually align the establishment, or should align the establishment of childcare centers with those of kindergartens. Under the free, quality kindergarten education service, the government should improve the quality of kindergarten education. The kindergarten, as a result, have to undertake a lot of administrative work, and so we propose the government can propose additional resources for the gardens to hire extra staff to undertake the administrative work. Finally, under the free quality kindergarten education, the Education Bureau proposes a salary scale, but that is only for reference only. So the government should really come up with a salary scale for kindergarten teachers. Government should subsidize kindergarten teachers so that the kindergartens can retain the talent and cope with the ever-increasing demand. Thank you. Madam Legislative Chu, perhaps you can. Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'm a Kai Fong living in Kwun Tong. We have 4 people in our family. We have 2 children. I brought the smallest child here because nobody can take care. of her. My husband has to work and I have to take care of my 2 children. It's really a very heavy burden. People may not know that we only stay at home and it's very comfortable just taking care of the children. Actually, it's even more exhausting than going to work. Looking after children before they go to kindergarten is a whole day work job. We have to take care of all their needs. We have to prepare our meals and so on. And we can't even sleep well at night. And when they get sick, we even more worried. And in the evening, we have to stay awake to see whether they are sweating or whether they are not well. After I have had my youngest child, I have to work non-stop 7 days a week around the clock. So even as mothers, we would like to have a day of rest so that we can really rest. In Kwun Tong, they have activities for mothers to participate in. There are volunteers there who help to take care of the children for a few hours, so that I can really have a leisurely meal. So I hope that in every district there could be such centers, provide a place where someone can help us look after our children for a couple of hours. It can lighten our burden. So I hope that such service could be provided in the childcare centers. What is the name of your child, Miss Choi? 李坤儀。
我記得我哋會呢個
like to put on a record. So I think when she grow up, she can look at the video footage and remember that she's been here when she was so young. Next, Miss Hong to you. Hello, I'm Kai Fong, living in Anderson Estate. It's a new public housing estate in Kwun Tong. I have 4 children. My children study in CHEUNG. I moved from CHEUNG to the Anderson Hill Estate. The child that I have with me is not yet attending school. My husband is to work, and I have to take care of my 2 children alone. It's a lot of work. My youngest child is attending preschool this year. I've enrolled him for a kindergarten in Lam Tin. I don't know whether I'm lucky or not. There are very few places in the district, and my child is successfully enrolled. At last, I can send my child to school and work, take up some part-time work to lighten the financial burden of the family.
And yet there are no M-class places in the estate. So we have to go back to Lam Tin. If it rains, then it will be difficult for me to decide who to look after. And I've heard about views on the after-school care program. In the mothers group I'm in at a community center, many mothers have said that the husbands work long hours and they are left to look after the kids the whole time. And whenever things happen, it's not easy for their husband to take time off their work. For example, if an adult gets sick, you want to go to see a doctor, right? So if a child gets sick, and the parent also sick, it's difficult for the parent to actually have to look after the kid as well, or she's not feeling well. Sometimes, well, if it's just to be away from the home for 2-3 hours, you can ask neighbors to look after the kid while the parent goes outside, for example, to see the doctor. But if it's for a longer period of time, who can spare the time to look after the child for you? Therefore, we really support having more after-school care program, and also to simplify the application procedure. And you should also step up training of home-based child carers so that parents can feel assured and feel at ease having their kids there. Thank you. Next one is Ms. Yuen Pu Yan, coming from the carers platform. Good morning. I brought my child with me. This is my second child. I am actually together with 2 other residents from Kwun Tong here. I live in Tin Shui Wai. I've brought our children here. It's very difficult for us to travel all the long way to here. It's very tiring for me because we have to bring with us a whole lot of actually other goods to actually look after my kid. It's difficult for we spend some time actually while carrying out strollers to find the escalator up to this electrical complex just then. But anyway, there are a few concrete proposals I'd like to make here. Firstly, this coming 3 minutes is really important. Like electrical members and officials to know. I want to show you. It's really difficult for us to show you. It's difficult for us to get things done even within 3 minutes. Well, there's also a need for actually occasional childcare services in Kwun Tong, Auto, Kok, Lam Tin. There are actually childcare places, altogether 29 of them. But this is really way short of what is needed. And this is only the usual childcare services. For emergency childcare, many mothers cannot find someone to look after kids for them, even when the mothers fall sick. So I'd like you to make reference to GoGo Van, make use of GoGo Van service, and to have more training for childcarers and monitor the organizations. I hope that you can register the home-based childcarers and make reference to GoGo Van's system or app, under which there should be an app for each or child carers in each district. So whenever registered family has the need, you can just input the information into the app on the age of the child, and then the registered carers can respond to the need through the app. This is really of much help in handling emergency situation in particular. I've talked a lot with fellow residents, and I found that whenever someone is in emergency and they needed to contact the center, and then the center has to spend time on finding a carer, and yet much time has been lost. I wouldn't know how I can cope with the emergency if so much time is taken to identify the right child carer. I hope that you can really provide this care service needed. And secondly, I hope that in some public hospitals you can set up provision of child care service, because many parents have told us that when they are sick, when they want to go to see a doctor and bring their child along, when I see the doctor, when I was waiting, if there's a carer looking after my child, that would be good. Or if there are 2 children with me and if one is sick and you need to bring along the other older kid along, then the older kid can be cared for by a carer while I'm waiting, or the parent is waiting in the hospital. I think public hospitals should be able to accommodate this need, because organizations can provide childcare service, and I think the same service can be provided by public hospitals. Thank you for concentrating on making the submission in 3 minutes while you're trying to look after your child. Thank you. I'm grateful. Next one is Ms. Li Wan Yin from Neighborhood Council. Good morning, fellow deputations. I'm very pleased that the government has done the consultancy study, the content of which, well, to us as a operator of childcare services, we think that is inadequate in some respects, because in terms of improving the mechanism, it hasn't really said a lot. We are concerned about the following 2 points. Firstly, about financial arrangement. For independent childcare centers, the government limits our expenditure actually through the provision for recognized expenditure scheme. But all along, many of the independent childcare centers found that for their coordinators' salaries or support staff salaries, clerical staff, or middle management officers' pay, with improvement in or overtime, there are new charges made, but all these expenses are not included in the government's evaluation of our financial planning. But without this provision and accommodation, it's difficult for us to really use our resources. I hope that the government can update its regulatory framework for organizations' finances so that we can have more flexibility in using our expenditure and income. And in the past, some years ago, for independent childcare centers, for every 5 centers, they should be able to hire 1 coordinator, and later on such arrangement was scrapped. But indeed, as a social service organization, in recent years there have been rising trend for accountability. Therefore, we need to carry a review of our service quality. All this for our centers. If you don't have clerical support or supervising arrangement, then all these accountability drives means that we need to leave it to our own staff to do that. I hope that the government can consider. I believe that in the future, each center will have to hire more teachers. We need more supervisors in place. And support staff like clerks are also important. Therefore, I hope that the government can restore allowing every 5 independent child care centers to have one recognized supervisor or coordinator or coordinating supervisor. Also, you can work out our expenditure on the base of the number of staff. There could be actually for each 10 teachers, there can be 1 supervising officer, and also there could be subsidy worked out, allowing us to hire middle management staff. We also need the support of a clerk, at least, for each center. I hope that the government can provide us, regardless of the size of a center, allow us to hire a clerk to do clerical work for us so that we can have more support. I hope that you can really incorporate supervising staff in your recognition or regulatory scheme. Thank you. Next one. Women's centers. Ms. Liu, thank you. As a women's organization, all along we've been concerned about women's and carers' rights. Carers are concerned about the development of children. In the consultancy study, in terms of support for childcare, the support, of course, directly affects the welfare of carers and women. We can see that for childcare services, the long-term development study shows that, after 2 years, it is inadequate in itself. In 2014, the policy addressed that, the consultancy study was mentioned, and then, together with other NGOs, we met with the Bureau and the Social Welfare Department to talk about the scope of the consultancy study, but unfortunately, the study was limited to reviewing existing services only. The room for improvement in existing services without going beyond existing provision and consider childcare services, additional childcare services for the grassroots and the middle class as well. So I'd like to say that the consultancy itself is inadequate in itself because of its limited scope. And also, we can find that the study was carried out over 2 years. I know that the team did a lot of hard work. They talked to a lot of people, carried out questionnaire surveys. We expected that the study could provide more concrete suggestions. And yet, it shows that many proposals made this time are more about a direction, overall direction. It lacks concrete suggestions like how the government can implement proposals made. Even though a number of proposals have been adopted, for example, the planning ratio. The study suggests that for 20,000 population, there should be 103 childcare places for 0 to 3 age group. And government says that this will be included in the planning ratio, Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines for 2019 and 20. If there are adequate or appropriate venues, they would incorporate it or plan for such centers. But in December last year, the SWD talked to some operators. They had exchanges with each other, and they gave a projection that under the latest planning ratio in 2021, that is 2 years later, there will be a need for 82 centers, childcare centers. But right now, there are only 12 subvented childcare centers offering 744 places. But that's gravely inadequate. I hope the government can open up more sites. For example, as mentioned in the policy address, in your allocation of land for land sale, request developers to include provision of childcare services in their development plan. Next one is Ms. Yang Ho-yin from the Hong Kong Women's Centers Association. Good morning, Secretary and members. Well, we're from the same organization, but we are based in Chun in Cheung. In 2016, we found that there's a big need for the community for the service. Therefore, we provided self-funded childcare services for parents, particularly moms in the district. We found that the government had not done a lot in providing childcare services for children aged 0 to 3. The need was so grave, therefore we offered the independent service, and yet the limitations to NGO budgets are limited, so there's a limit to how many residents we could serve. Therefore, I really hope that the government could take up the responsibility instead. Besides childcare services, besides space, carers themselves are an important part of CCS. But I find it regretful that the latest study did not propose making child carers become a profession, because if you make it a profession, then right now, contrary to now, the government relies on home-based child carers to offer the child care support. But as you know, home-based child carers rely mostly on volunteers. Many of the carers are mainly volunteers. Secretary, do you know that volunteer carers, the problem with them is that they're not stable, because they can quit anytime. They're not signatories to any contracts, and neither are they entitled to minimum wage. The study said that the incentive payment should be increased, but still it's not a job for the carers. So they're not protected by any employment legislation. Many women we contacted said that they would not want to use child carers, particularly in Shenzhen, where there are a lot of subdivided flats, and moms are concerned about security and safety issues. They wonder whether the kids may be caught in accidents. And if the child carers only receive a few hours of training, would that be enough for the carers to ensure children's safety at home in such a cramped environment? So therefore, despite the provision of the childcare service and the grave need for them, parents may not be willing to rely on child carers. So they would rather go to childcare centers. They feel that they are better regulated, and they feel more at ease because the carers at the childcare centers are trained. So I have two proposals here. Firstly, the government should consider making the child carers a kind of profession, provide training for them, and provide resources for the training. And if you want to create more childcare centers, it's not easy because of the land constraints. So I suggest that you can use churches or schools, ask them to open up their venues during weekdays to collaborate with them to provide childcare services. Thank you. Next one is Lau Hong Ching from the Hong Kong Women's Centre Association. Yes, I'm also a colleague from the Hong Kong Women's Centre Association. We're based in Tai Po, Taiwan Estate. In 2014, we began, under the Social Welfare Department, the Neighborhood Support Childcare Centres, or the mutual help childcare centers, to provide childcare services for parents nearby. Compared to home-based child carers, in our mutual help childcare centers, the children will come to our places, venues, and the parents will not need to worry about the risks of leaving their children at the hands of carer at home, and they would not need to be worried about neglect as well of the kid. In our contact with parents, we found that the many register for child carers, but they know that in the face of strange carers, the children may not be totally safe. And also, we provide emergency relevant childcare services for families facing an emergency situation. And we can provide services for parents, but for child carers, they need to go through a matching process. So it's difficult to find carers in an emergency situation compared to centers like ours. And yet the report said that our center's utilization rate is quite low, and our role seems to overlap with that of child carers, and therefore they suggested that the mutual help child care centers to be restructured. But the low usage rate of our centers because of the lack of regular support from the government, and we as operators therefore do not have the resources nor the incentive to reach out to those in need. And we found that quite a number of users of our services are parents. They have to go to work. They can't afford to look after their own children. So how can they find the carers they need? Luckily, we do have a good group of volunteers who provide service for us. We have 310 families who register as members and more than 140 volunteers helping us. On average, there are 170 recipients of our services. Last year, we actually offered services that's beyond or that's double our undertaking. The report showed that for families with foreign domestic helpers, they need not be covered by the welfare policy, but our experience showed that relying on foreign domestic helpers is not reliable. Many of you here may have foreign domestic helpers at home, but how can you control when the domestic helper might quit? In the last few months, we heard from parents who told us that their foreign domestic helpers quit, and the working parents felt that they are helpless. So the mutual help childcare centers can meet their need. I know that the government wants to transform mutual help childcare centers into after-school care centers for 0 to 3 age group. But the after-school care program now covers the age about 6. And we can only accommodate 14 0 to 3 children, in our premises. So there's a limitation to what we can do. Secretary, have you considered where can those in age 0 to 3 can get the services? They cannot be in school, they're too young, and they need community support in their age, small age. Next one is Miss Chang. Please turn on the mic. Miss Chang in the first row, please. Chair Chiu-hung. Good morning. I've been doing childcare service for more than 30 years. I used to be in the front line, and now I'm supervising various childcare centers and kindergartens. During my work, I've always hoped that the manning ratio can be optimized. So I'm very pleased to see in the consultancy report that, there are a number of references shown on the manning ratios overseas, 1.3 in Korea and New Zealand, Australia, 1 to 4. I hope that there can be drastic improvement in manning ratio in Hong Kong, but I'm a bit disappointed in that the ratio in Hong Kong is 1 to 8 for 0 to 3, and 2 to 3 is 1 to 14.
我入行再早幾
Back in 1976, 40 years ago, the ratio was 1 to 6. So we are not seeing a lot of progress. I'm also involved in training teachers in a university. I know these are frontline people are having a tough time. And we're talking about babies from 0 to 1. When they are feeding the babies and some other babies are crying, all they could do is to just give the babies a pet. I'm saddened by this. We are saying that we should attach more importance to the quality of carers. If the carers can play and with the children more and provide better service, the babies will be benefited. We are lagging behind in terms of manning ratio. Many countries are adopting ratios such as 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. So if we adopt a ratio of 1 to 6 for children or young children from age 0 to 2, I would like to ask, what's the justification of doing this? Why do we stick to the ratio that we introduced in 1976, i.e. 1 to 6? As a experienced childcare workers, I would like you to consider adjusting the ratios. The younger the children, the higher the ratio. 1 to 3 for 0 to 2, or 1 to 4 from 3 to 6, and then for from 2 to 3, 1 to 8. Mr. Chung Sai-chung from Hong Kong, the Federation of Women Centers. My organization has been paying a lot of attention to childcare. We have a childcare working group to look at how we can meet childcare needs. We should provide a better environment for children. The report would adopt the Chiu-hung notion. We subscribe to that direction. We believe that would mean that we see a quality improvement in childcare. The government should promote the notion of educator in childcare more extensively. It said that in the early stage of child development, childcare should be integrated with child development training. But childcare services provided in Hong Kong, in line with the report's proposals, and also in the 1991 white paper on providing child support, or is there a change? If there's a change, then we would like to ask why, and if not, why not? Would the principles on which childcare services provided still welfare based? The government is just going to apply the educator concept in subsidized childcare centers, but not in all other childcare centers. But if the government thinks this is a good concept, why limit yourself to the subsidized childcare centers? The current provision level is insufficient to meet the demands. That's why they have the service has to be supplemented by the home-based childcare and neighborhood schemes and mutual health schemes. The government should improve the schemes of these supplementary programs so that the service provider will be actually an integration and education and childcare. The government must answer these questions. We hope the government would implement measures as soon as possible, and there should be a clear timetable so that women will know that they are not in for an indefinite wait. Miss Chair.
哇，唔好意思，唔
唔緊要。
唔好意思嚇。
OK 可以。
大家好，我係觀塘個街。
I'm a resident of Kwun Tong. I've bring along my baby because there's no one who can take care of her. My husband work in the airport, and I take care of my own children, and because I have to care for them, I cannot work. And whenever I go out, I have to bring my baby and all the things that my baby's needs. It's a heavy luggage that I have to carry every time I go out with the baby. It's harder than working, in my view. If I work, well, it's for a definite period in the day. Child care is different. And you have to rise at night for a number of times. Sometimes there's a center for mothers in Kwun Tong, and I have joined such programs. so that we can go out for lunch without the need to take our children as well. The service hours are good. I hope that there will be a center in every district providing childcare for children, which preschool children, so that mothers can have some time off, even if it's limited to a few times, or say 2 times a month. Thank you. Thank you.
接住落嚟係雷啟蓮女士。
Miss Leung Ka-lin from the association called All in a Family. Some parents have offered their views. And Secretary, you have been implementing the measures to promote employment or re-employment of women. But you need to provide the support. It is inadequate at the time. And because of the inability to find child care service, many women cannot really work. I'm a district councillor of Wong Tai Sin District Council. I can tell you that we see many support measures, and sometimes mothers are keen to join different activities, but they cannot do so because they have to take care of their children. Here lies a number of problems. According to some surveys, the number of places in the child care center is very limited. It's difficult to get a place given the competition, and also the cost is high. Child care cost is high, and these families have to take care of other expenditure, and the household expenditure may be something like $20,000 to $30,000. This is a heavy burden even for middle class families, and the supplies is way below this the level needed to meet the needs. And some parents have to seek service from another district, leading to deterioration of service provision in other districts. And from time to time, we see cases of children being left alone at home. Very often, the neglect on the part of the parents is caused by the need to work. The number of child care places for those under 2, we have very limited places of whole day child care places is virtually nothing, and it's difficult for mothers to get a job that can enable them to take care of the children as well, especially young children. So they have to rely on the husband as a sole breadwinner to meet all kinds of house or family expenditure. We hope that more should be done to provide better child care, increase the training to increase the manpower for child care, and then women will be able to work, and then they will improve their family's situation and relationship with the family members. Ms. Medina Spears.
I represent Pathfinders. Foreign domestic workers are key in providing childcare services to many Hong Kong families. Pathfinders welcomes the government consultancy study on the long-term development of childcare services and generally support its recommendations, in particular those relating to training for home-based childcarers such as foreign domestic workers. However, the study fails to consider 1. The childcare needs of foreign domestic workers during their maternity leave and when they give birth in Hong Kong, and 2. The long-term care of children in the welfare system. The purpose of this submission is to make recommendations to ensure that foreign domestic workers and children in care are included in measures to improve childcare provision in Hong Kong and to reinforce calls for training for home-based childcare carers. Childcare services for babies born to foreign domestic workers in Hong Kong. There are currently 380,000 domestic workers in Hong Kong. This number is due to rise over 600,000 in the coming years. The majority of foreign domestic workers are women of childbearing age, and it is not surprising that many of them have children here in Hong Kong. Under the government's live-in rule, foreign domestic workers have to live in their employer's home even during their maternity leave. Unsurprisingly, most employers are unwilling or simply unable to accommodate a baby. If the mother does not have family or friends in Hong Kong able to care for the child, the baby often ends up staying in the public hospital while awaiting documentation so that the mother and baby can return to their home countries. Long-term care within the welfare system. Despite many calls from pathfinders and others working in child welfare for the Social Welfare Department to enshrine permanency planning in their childcare policies, too many children are still stuck in the public care system. Pathfinders has cases where children are languishing in institutional or foster care as nobody can resolve issues of parental authority, nationality, and/or immigration status. Childcare training for foreign domestic workers. The study clearly identifies foreign domestic workers as important in provision of childcare services in Hong Kong. It is crucial that any individual to whom the care and well-being of our children is entrusted is fully trained and aware of the latest developments and best practice in childcare. So we make the following recommendations. 1. The government either relaxes the live-in rule during foreign domestic workers' maternity leave or establishes a mother and a baby unit where foreign domestic workers on maternity leave can live with their newborns. 2. The Social Welfare Department should set clear and practical procedures to guide permanency planning and residential childcare to minimize delays in establishing a safe permanent future for the child. For example, in the UK, a strict timetable case reviews and action is set out to the UK Children and Families Act of 2014, enforces a 26-week deadline in care all supervisions and other family proceedings. 3. The government should fully embrace the study recommendations for interim measures to provide training for foreign domestic workers to enhance their knowledge of early brain and childhood development and upgrade their childcare skills. A certificate should be issued to foreign domestic workers who successfully completed training courses. And 4. Comprehensive and legally enforceable regulations should be introduced to ensure accountability, quality, and consistency across all childcare services. Thank you.
Thank you。下一位係袁巧瑩女士。
係，早晨，大家好。我就喺幼兒教育行業咧已經工作咗。
I've been working in the childcare sector for 16 years. I worked as a teacher, a deputy principal, and now I'm a warden in a facility to take care of babies from the age of 0 to 3. When I took up this job, this latest job, I was surprised to know that there's no clerical support in the center. In a school, though, there will be clerks, there will be senior teachers or vice principal helping the principal to do the administrative and clerical work. But you know that we need to follow SQS, that there will be a lot of paperwork. We need to issue quarterly reports, and there are statistics, and there are also financial documents to handle. Well, people like me are holding master qualifications, so why we are given much less. So I think we need to satisfy a basic need. We need to have clerks to help the principals and officer in charge. Otherwise, we need to help the teachers to carry out the duties. And sometimes if we don't have sufficient carers, we have to help out as well. And so in other words, at times like this, the center is not actually managed by anyone. We know there's a SOE scheme to help centers to get the grant, but it's less than $10,000 a month. It's difficult. It's impossible to get a clerk on that kind of subsidy. Second, On the question of supervisory role, we hope that for every 5 independent childcare centers, we can have a supervisor, because childcare service has been standardized and formalized, and we need some supervisor for these centers to ensure quality of service in all childcare centers. So 2 requests this time. Sufficient grants should be given for the employment of at least 1 center. For bigger center, there should be 2 clerks. And then for every 5 childcare centers, we should need to have a supervisor. If the network is smaller, there should be a pro rata grant. Thank you for putting forth this very humble request. Mr. Wong Ka-yan. Good morning, Chairman and Secretary. I'm the mother of a baby of a child of 1.5 years. Well, when my son was born, I started to queue up for the maternity services. I have a specific request today. School fee is a big burden on many families. We are talking about a lot of necessities of young children, food, accommodation, and so on and so forth. We spend thousands of dollars on baby formula and diapers and school for 3P families. It would be 1/6 of $34,000 medium income, and we have to take care of our parents and even grandparents sometimes. So we can't have ends meet. And is it really true that the children will be fully satisfied if they go to study and have food? We have 4 generations living under the same roof. We are a very harmonious family, but there are very few families in Hong Kong. We have family members who are as old as 100 and as young as 1 year old. You cannot imagine the kind of money that we need to spend on the family. And it's said that your future will be determined when you are 3. And you have a lot of people using mobile phones, but do you see mobile phones given to children in the childcare centers? And very often family members cannot take care of young children, and we have to rely on foreign domestic helpers, and that means that the upbringing is very problematic.
So just imagine 10, 20 years from now, what will be the values held by these children when they grow up? If they miss that opportunity when they are before 3, they cannot make it up afterwards. So I hope the Secretary will consider lowering the fees for childcare centers and also provide broader and better ways to support parents. Next, Madam Young Ka-po. Regarding the report on the long-term study for development of childcare centers, I don't think you have addressed the question of the need for supervisory staff. There is no provision for clerks and supervision in these childcare centers. Very often it's the supervisor who will undertake such duties, taking telephones, meeting with parents, and even have to take up cleaning duties. And we also have to report to the SWD. As I said, it includes drafting quarterly report, compiling statistics, the 16 service standards, periodic quality supervision and internal control. Sometimes you may even need to be accountable to the media and public. The center needs a basic clerical support. So we really have a very humble request. We hope that for every childcare center, we will be given sufficient subsidy to hire one clerk. We hope that there could be more supervisory support for every 5 childcare centers. There should be one, officer to coordinate the supervision, and allowance to be provided to each on a pro rata basis. Regarding enhancing the investment on childcare service, providing flexible financial supervision. We are now getting a 20% subsidy, but 15% are restricted on expenditure on manpower. Only 5% would come under SOE. For a small center, every month is about $118,000, less than $10,000 per month. Compared with the 1990s, is even less. The current service, for the current service, we are relying on fees paid by parents. When there's a major outbreak of a disease or when the economy slows down, some of the centers will have to close down. With the end of the epidemic and when the economy recovers, these centers have already shrunk in size and we're no longer able to meet the needs of parents. In 1997 financial crisis and during the SARS epidemic, this has happened. In the last 20 years, the operational needs of centers have gone up, and therefore we need to increase the level of subsidies. I think for the SOE, I think it should be equal to the annual operating expenditure. Next, Ms. Wong Hao Kei. Thank you. I am a parent and I'm using childcare service. I think that there's a keen demand for childcare service when both parents are working. I think in my family, our incomes are okay and we're able to afford a foreign domestic helper. But why is it that we have such a keen demand for childcare service? Just imagine our grandparents, they brought us up when we were young. We want to really reward them with a comfortable life. I don't want to place the burden of taking after the young children onto their shoulders. So our grandparents will only play with the grandchildren. They may be worried if they're sick. If they have to take care of grandchildren, they don't even have their own, social life. Is that what we want? And secondly, indeed, we can afford to hire a domestic helper, but for us, where both parents are working, it's good. We're fortunate if we have a good domestic helper. If not, then we'll be worried what she might do. Even if you have a capable domestic helper, you still would worry. And for foreign domestic helpers, we would want to teach them the skills regarding child development. So if we only entrust our children to the foreign domestic helper, that's not desirable. In the childcare centers, they do have professionals to help, but domestic helpers don't have such skills. The report said that for children under the age of 6, how do we work out the priorities? It would depend on whether you have the support. Even if we have such support for us where both spouses are working, we still need such, so we very much need such childcare service. Thank you. Ms. Lee Kan-yen, good morning. As a parent, I fully agree with the government's proposal that we should improve the manning ratio for childcare centers, but the ratio proposed to the government is still lower than the standard in many other countries. So I think we need to further lower the ratio, because childcare service involves care and education. Only then can we have a healthy development and take care of the needs of the development needs of the children. The mothers would be very busy taking out the babies already. They have to feed the babies, change the diapers, check on the health, and so on. Even if I only look after one child, it's already a heavy burden. If childcare service were developed well, I'm fortunate that I've been able to send my child to a childcare center, and I don't want to cover the part about taking after the physiological needs of the children. But the center will arrange activities for young children to learn. For these toddlers, we're not talking about academic learning. The childcare workers will help the development of a child. When a child goes to the center, they have all kinds of activities like physical exercise. The teacher will sing with them, tell them stories, and help them play with toys, and teach them sign language, because and train our child to look after themselves. For example, how to drink from a cup, go into the toilet themselves. The carers don't even have a break on weekends, because very often they would organize activities for parents to participate. So they need a lot of time to prepare for such activities. And the babies some would sometimes cry or have temper tantrums. So the work for these childcare carers is extremely non-stop. And the carers do not just look after the children, they also have to cater to the parents. They need to maintain a close liaison with parents. And whenever I go to the center or pick up my child there, I would always, check with the carer about, how my child is doing. So the childcare carers really would patiently explain to us about, how our children are doing at the center. The carers are so busy, the teachers are so busy. For example, on one occasion, I have to pick up my child earlier than scheduled in order to get his inoculation. And when I went to the center, I saw that all the lights were switched off. Perhaps it was time for lunch or a child to take a nap. But even in such during this time, the teachers were still working with the computers, and they only have 45 minutes for lunch, and sometimes they can't finish their clerical work, and they have to take them home. So the teachers are so busy that I wonder how much time they can afford to spend on our children. So it's not fair to these childcare workers. It's also not good for our children either. I hope the government will further lower the manning ratio. Next, Ms. Kok Ming Yip, sorry. I am a parent. My child attends a child care center, and today I'd like to share with you that is when both spouses are working, there's no one in the family to look after our children. I have two children, and both my husband has to work, some very often even working overtime. Grandma is living far away, cannot help, and my grandfather's health is not very good, and he also has to work. He can't help. And there are not many places in these childcare centers. My eldest was born in December. When I was pregnant 5 months, I already started to enroll for her, and it was only in September that she was offered a place. So we have been queuing for 14 months. I live in Lok Fu, but I was allocated a place in a childcare center in Hong Kong. Every day I have to take my young child to Hong Kong, and it's not very convenient. But at least there will be someone there to look after the development of my child. Before I was offered a place at the center, I had also hired a domestic helper. And they're not very efficient, and they don't have any, concepts about safety. So they don't even know how to perform, proper domestic work. So they don't. How can we expect them to communicate with young children or help them develop? They don't even know how to take proper care of the children. When we don't have the confidence, and while we are working, we will check on the camera to monitor what the domestic helper is doing, and we cannot focus on our work. And these domestic helpers can quit at any time, and once they quit, there will be no one to attend to our children. Fortunately, in September, I was offered a place in a childcare center, and at last there's a professional teacher to look after my child, and the teacher will periodically report to us about the state, the condition of our children, take care of his needs so we can go to work confidently. And when the child is not feeling well, the childcare center, well, even during holidays, there will be other people to look after the children. Well, the children will finish school at 6. I only finish at 6:30, so I'm never able to pick up my children. So even if we have domestic helpers, we still need custodian service for our children. We hope that the government could offer more places in different districts so that we have the confidence to take up employment. Finally, on the subject of fees, for my children, every month we pay $55,000 per child, so it's more than $10,000 per month. We pay another $10,000 for rent. On top of that, we have to pay for the milk formula, diapers, and everything. So the expenditure would amount to already close to $30,000 already. So I hope the government can provide more subsidies in order to lighten our burden. Also, you've not mentioned that you have to pay tax. Next is Zhang Lui. I'm a veteran childcare worker. I work in an independent childcare center as a teacher. I'm very happy to learn about the proposed improvements on childcare center. Regarding the career ladders, I think if there could be provide for better prospects, it can attract talents to join the profession. For childcare workers and kindergarten teachers, the entry requirements are the same. When they first take up the employment, they need to at least have a higher diploma or even a degree before they can become kindergarten teachers or childcare workers. With the professionalization of kindergarten teachers, all of them now have degrees, like those of primary and secondary schools. For independent childcare workers catering to our center look after children from 0 to 2 of age, and for childcare for us childcare workers, there are no promotion prospects. There are only 2 grades, childcare workers and then the head mistress. So we have 16 teachers in the center. There is no deputy principal or supervisors to help us. Whereas for our peers, for every 5 teachers, there's 1 supervisor and 1 deputy headmistress, for every 10 staff in kindergartens. At childcare, in the childcare centers, we have fewer promotion prospects, so we're not offered a very attractive career prospect. So as a result, it's not able to attract, top talents to join the profession. Whereas in secondary and primary schools, you have, teachers and also others who undertake administrative work. They have career masters, activity masters, and panel chairmen, and so on to help. Whereas for us, these more senior childcare workers also take up the administrative work, but the experienced childcare worker would be, a class mistress, and he's also a photographer. He's also the clerk. He has to arrange for graduation ceremony, to be the choreographer, arrange for graduation ceremonies, and so on. And it's a lot of work if you have to undertake all such administrative work. And many of our colleagues have quit because of that. And I hope that the government would create an additional rank or grade, so that and also that there could be additional resources to help us with the administrative work. Good afternoon. Good morning. I've been in the childcare profession for many years. I'm now a teacher. Last year, I have also become a mother myself. So I really love my profession. And through this opportunity, I would like to share with you what really our profession needs. What I most want to say is about the environment and facilities in these childcare centers. Every day when I go to work, I'll be very tired. I have to repeat that 3 times. Why is it that I get so tired? Because every time when I go to the center, I have to undertake many physical tasks. The facilities and environment are very backward, given that we are a very advanced society. We need to do a lot of physical work. We have to bend and hold these young children. It's only when we return home that we are back to the modern society. So childcare service now is not just care. We're now talking about edu-care. But our facilities are very backward. Our equipment and facilities cannot catch up with the advanced technology that we are seeing now. And we follow the code on preschool education, and we need to arrange for activities for our children. We have to provide sufficient space for children's activities, so perhaps the government should reconsider the space provision for childcare centers. We're talking about 2.8 square meters per head. So just imagine how confined the space is. So our facilities and our space provisions are very unreasonable. So as the child develops, I think we should align ourselves with other countries. I think we should enhance and improve our facilities. What we want is that perhaps there could be a playroom so that children can, engage in exploratory activities. There should be advanced nursing equipment, facilities, support for parents, and so on and so forth, before our children can have a quality environment to grow. Also, I hope that we could be provided disinfection, ventilation, and lighting, facilities. When new centers are built, I think children nowadays are not exposed to sunlight. They stay at the center for 8 hours. They don't see the sunlight at all. So when you build new centers, you could consider providing for a garden. We have an outbreak of flu just because children simply don't have the chance to get outdoors. Next, Ms. Ho Si-wei.
好，我係一位
Good afternoon. I work in a nursery on the ratio of staffing ratio in nursery and childcare centers. I'd like to make some suggestions. I believe that we need to improve the staffing ratio, but the government is proposing that is to 1.6 and 1.11 for 0 to 2 age group. The ratio is not adequate because small children needs a lot of attention, and the teachers need to follow up on their development. But now, because of severe staffing shortage, every day in nurseries, we can only focus on actually offering personalized care, basic care like feeding, changing diapers of the children. If we had more manpower, then we could have spent time also on looking after the small kids' emotions and developing closer ties with the small children. More manpower also allows teachers to provide tailor-made activities for the children so as to have a close observation of their own individual development and prepare optimize various activities according to their needs and abilities so that children can have enriched experience for their future development, personal growth as well. In my exchanges with parents, I strongly feel that parents actually have much higher expectations for nurseries. Every day when the parents pick up their children, they will ask me not just what the children did, they will also ask how their children are growing. Are they able to walk for many steps? Can they actually eat rice on their own? They actually wonder, and also we wonder how we can do a better job in fostering children's development. Parents do attach much importance there. I'm sure many of you here are parents. If you were to send your child to a nursery, you would want to see that the kids, besides daily feeding and personal development, they can have very relevant care. It's a pity that the administration is only to restore the staffing ratio at nursery to 1:6. Ratio of 1:6, but that really is not enough for fostering children's whole person development. Education and care are recognized internationally as the care that should be given to small children. So why do you restore the staffing ratio to the 1976 level? As a professional childcare worker, I really hope to give the best to our next generation. Besides, because of the staffing ratio, it is important on actually the quality and time we spend with the children. You need to lower the staffing ratio and also to make the service even more professionalized. So we're proposing that you should adjust the staffing ratio to 1:3.5 for 0 to 2 age group and 1:8 for 2 to 8 age group. I hope that you can respond to the sector's response. Thank you. Next one is Ms. So Yi, coming from the Hong Kong Children's Protection Society. I'd like to thank the Secretary and the Department for sitting through the entire meeting. You've heard a lot of deputations. Let me stress 2 points. For details, the paper also already has them. Firstly, for the sector, we agree with the report that we should increase financial support for childcare service and also offer flexible financial supervision. Childcare centers right now are working under a system that dates back to the reimbursement model dating back to 1980s. So that's a system adopted decades ago. In 2020, with the lump sum system that encouraged innovation among centers, but our centers have been bound by a very rigid system over the past 40 years still. And the system itself cannot, as mentioned by others, even for supervising staff, every 5 centers there should be 1 coordinating officer and so forth. Whether we can actually have center in charge or even class, we don't have the provision for allowing for the creation of those posts, and not to mention more subsidy for admin costs and the insurance and banking fees and so forth. All those are not recognized by the government. I can't tell my staff, oh, we don't have the money because we can't spend on those fees. We can't do that, so we can only through fundraising exercises every year to make ends meet, and that's a heavy and long-term financial burden for us, to have to raise the money needed. And that is also a great obstacle to our provision of services. People ask us what more we can do to find the help we need. But why can't the administration actually try to catch up with the needs there and try to meet the needs of the parents? Because if you don't give us enough flexibility, we can never upgrade our service to meet parents' needs. So I think you can try to improve on the basis of the lump sum grant system and to provide enough flexibility for organizations to allow us make use of our resources to enhance our service quality. The administration may say, well, you said that there's SOE, but SOE, as mentioned by the fellow staff, for small centers is 120,000 and for larger centers is 240,000 only. It's not enough to pay for the salary of even a clerk, not to mention hiring a supervising officer. Let me say that you should really make good use of all the experiences in childcare accumulated in the sector. Parents said that they don't want more talks or just answering queries. Every day, parents come into a lot of difficulties in looking after the child. They can't find a doctor every time, and they want someone who can, or a center who can provide them with the staff and professional opinions to help the parents. So you need to help centers increase their manpower as well. So it's like in Taiwan and the mainland, we can take the initiative to provide parental education for those with children under the age of 6. Thank you. Next one is Ms. Tang, coming from One Big U Daycare Center. Good afternoon. Just then, deputations have mentioned about the lack of clerks, supervising support in childcare centers. For nurseries, please note its characteristic. They are long whole day operations. Therefore, for children, they are there from 8 a.m. all the way to 7 p.m. in the evening. well, teachers don't work that long, so therefore our staff work in shifts. For nurseries, it's rare for them to have the centers closed. Therefore, when the centers are open, there could be staff who take time off and or go on sick leave. So when the centers are open, there's the chance that we could be short-staffed. Every day, when students are actually attending school and off school, we need to have the enough staff. When there's a staff shortage, supervisors may need to fill in the gap. So the supervisors then may need to support the staff and do the coordination, receive parents and so forth, all sorts of work, or even answering telephone. Besides that, they may have to order goods, receive goods, put chops on receipts and so forth. So the supervisors do all sorts of work because the carers need to look after, or the teachers need to look after the kids. So you can imagine the workload that parents have asked me. Running a center is difficult, right? Yes, I said. There are not that many places within the center, but it's just that we're short-staffed. I used to have two principal of a kindergarten with 200 kindergarten students. I have one class, two supervisors, and accounting officer, and also other section or team leaders. So we have lots of support staff for a nursery in provision of their services. And yet, in many nurseries here, we only have teachers, and the head of the nursery had to do all of the other work. If someone is on leave, then who would do the clerical work? If someone is on sick leave or holiday, then who would need to do all those work? Well, the remaining staff have to work till very late in the evening then. There are paperwork to be handled, right? We need to fill in papers requested by the SWD and so forth, or make reports or do some other calculation work for services. So I do hope that we can be given more support in admin work and supervisory work. And for afternoon childcare center, there should be a supervisor and also deputy in charge for childcare centers provided, so that we can have better management of the centers and provide quality service, so that small kids can grow in a favorable environment and be well looked after. I hope that the administration can consider our request. Next one, Ms. Chen Qing-yi. Good afternoon. I'm speaking in the capacity of a parent who's working. I'm enjoying the service of nursery. I'm not talking about the number of clerical staff. I'm just sharing with you my own experience. I couldn't get into a nursery because of the long waiting queue. When I discussed it with my family, my mother-in-law objected. She said that children are left unattended in nursery. Why don't I look after the kid instead? And I said, what would be difficult for you? And my mother-in-law said, well, I can get the support and help from her husband, my father-in-law. So I was pleased to hear that. And yet, when my child was about 5-6 months old, and the child began to be able to recognize people and get sick sometimes, he cried a lot when he was sick. And my parents-in-law complained to me about the tough work needed. And my mother-in-law complained to me that one day the child cried uncontrollably, and my father-in-law just covered the baby's mouth with a pillow so as to lower the voice, the noise level. So I felt so sorry for the child. And yet I need to leave the child with my father and mother-in-law. When he was 11 months old, I returned home from work one day, and my mother-in-law said to me in a very firm manner that she would not look after the child anymore. I was taken aback. I couldn't quit, and I couldn't find a domestic helper either at that time. I couldn't sleep at night upon hearing the news, and I heard that I once queued up for a place in a nursery. So therefore I called up the nursery and asked the supervisor for help. I told her that I was in a very critical situation, and then the supervisor looked up my record. Luckily, I had queued up before I was had given birth. I had waited for 11 months. So I was about to be given a place, and I was also grateful that the supervisor told me it was June, and she told me that one student quit in that month, so there's a vacant spot. So I felt so lucky, as if I had won the Mark 6. So I asked my mother and father-in-law to look after the kid for 1 more month. After that, my kid will be sent to the nursery, and they agreed. So I feel that even you say that 60-year-olds are middle age, you need a lot of compassion, patience, love, and energy to look after a child. Because the child will always cling to you, and once you leave them behind, they will cry uncontrollably. And yet the carers are under a lot of emotional stress. So I was so pleased to have found the nursery. But still the fees in the nursery are so high. The subsidy is such that once you make more than $25,000 a month, you will not be eligible for the subsidy. We need to pay for our rents, and we have our own expenses, and for the kid as well. So we had to struggle to find the fee needed at the nursery. So I hope that the government can really take note of the subsidy level, try to lower the threshold for getting the subsidy so we can be entitled to it. Secretary, please, I hope that you can take on board my request. Next one, Mr. Fong Wing Lock. Good afternoon, Chairman, everyone. I'm a parent. When we knew that we were going to have a child, we're very pleased. And yet we consider a lot of things like who should look after the kid. We thought of various options. One is to hire a foreign domestic helper. But I find it strange to have a foreign domestic helper because they were not trained in looking after a kid. They were trained to do household work instead, and I also heard complaints or stories about domestic helpers from overseas and not doing a proper job. And secondly, we could ask our own parents to look after the kid. It's best to have your parents looking after the kid. I married late. By the time I had a child, I was in my 30s. And I and my wife and the parents, my parents are quite old already. And my dad needs to be careful, so I can ask him to look after my kids. So in the end, we decided that one of us, I or my wife, would need to quit work. And yet, you know that if you've been working for some time and you start working, your income will be reduced. And you may say that, well, people might study and then you can study and then go back to work later on. But it's not easy for you to return to the workforce after you've quit. It's not that easy. Luckily, my mother-in-law agreed to look after the kid for us. After 4 months, we managed to get a place in the nursery. Why did we know about the nursery? Because we're talking about the situation with our friends and they reminded us about the nursery. And only then did we know about the service available. Luckily, well, when did I join the queue? It was when my kid was still in my wife's womb. That was when the kid, was found to have. We could monitor the heartbeat of the kid. Even though it's not a good idea to hire a foreign domestic helper, we didn't have the space to, have to accommodate a domestic helper anyway. My flat was not big, it's not feasible. So later I moved to a bigger place. We wanted to have a second child. Well, we ended up having twins. So we face the same problem. Should we get a foreign domestic helper or what? It's not easy to find a domestic helper who will be willing to look after 3 kids. It's difficult to find one. So we asked our parents to help. Well, even looking after one is so tough for them. So in the end, we decided that I should quit. So only one of us worked. So why is it the dad who stopped working? Well, because I and my wife make about the same amount of money, and I feel that I'm as a male I'm more energetic, so I could better handle 3 kids at the same time, whereas my wife can't. Because I had experience, so I had queue also. When the heartbeat was shown in the babies, in the twins, when they were only 1 cm big in size, by the time they were 4 months old, we managed to get a place in the nursery. But by then, I kept calling the nursery when we would be given the places because I need to feed the babies 16 times a day, so I couldn't really bear with me it anymore. When I called the nursery called me that, oh, sorry, your place was lost. I burst into tears upon hearing it, and yet the week later they called me to tell me that there's a place available after all. So you can see that for parents who are both working, nursery, the places there is so important. If they had told me that there are places in nursery, I may not have quit. But if there are no places, I had no choice but to quit, so as to look after the family. Thank you. Thank you for your sharing of your own personal story. Next one is Ms. Cheung from a nursery. I'm very pleased to see that the government is seriously looking at the issue of childcare services for those aged 0 to 3. I can see that for kindergartens, government has reduced the ratio there and offered vouchers. And yet for those aged 0 to 3, nothing has been done and the sector is lagging behind. We all agree that this smallest age group needs more care and attention. The ratio of 1 to 8, you can imagine what it means. Teachers are so busy. They have to change diapers and feed the kids. They have to monitor and observe the kids, whether they overreact or and so forth, whether the sleeping pattern is safe or not. Say if you feed a baby, which takes half an hour, if you have 8 kids, it will take 4 hours. From 8 a.m. all the way, like 9 a.m. when you start feeding, within 3.5 hours you need to feed 8 kids, including changing their diapers. And also put them to sleep. It's really not easy to do that in that period of time. My family once walked past my center and asked me, why is it that in the afternoon the children actually make so much noise? They needed to be pampered, and yet we didn't have enough hands. We want to increase and enhance our service for them. You need to understand that for small kids, small babies, besides sleeping and being fed, they need to feel safe, particularly, since they are new to the world. I'm also a mom. I like to talk to my kids after feeding them and embrace them, hold them when they're very small, and their eyes can tell you that they do admire you, admire mommies. I really like to hold them more, but because of limited manpower, we as carers and nurseries cannot really hold every one of the kids. Their smiles, the smiles of babies, kept me working in the nursery for more than 10 years. I hope that the ratio of 1 to 6 can be further reduced to 1 to 4, 1.3, because that would be the best arrangement in terms of teachers' energy and the welfare of the babies. I know that many parents have queued for nursery services, but they have to wait a long time before being given a place. Every year, there's only like 20 vacant places every year, and some parents have to wait till their babies are 2 years old. So I hope that you need to provide more support for all centers. Some school premises who are in need of repair and new facilities, maybe the government can consider increasing resources for them. And in the same district, if there are to relocate those school premises to make way for the centers. You may not have such a policy arrangement now, but you can consider whether such policy should be brought into place.
And teachers may have to attend evening training programs, and we want to update and upgrade our qualifications, and I have little time to take care of my own children. I hope the government would seriously consider the request from the childcare sector and offer more assistance to frontline people. My name is Hon SHIU from Roundtable. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I think what we heard is just the tip of the iceberg. My grandmother took care of me for 8 years. She's very old now. It's important that we provide child care to lessen the burden of the family. Roundtable is of the view that we should provide more child care so that parents can work and be more self-reliant. He said that the government would provide more training, and we certainly agree. Home-based childcare should enroll on training courses offered by VTC and other service providers, and also the hourly remuneration should be at the level of minimum wage level, $34.5 a month. And we should make reference to the public transport subsidy scheme and provide traveling subsidy to carers so that they can save on the cost of traveling and to encourage more to become carers. And the service recipients' age limit should be 12. At present it's 9. For those in the age of 9 to 12, they need to be careful. This will extend the this recipient coverage. Thank you. All deputations have now spoken. I'll ask the Secretary to respond now. Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank all the deputations for coming to this meeting to express their views. As in the last session, we have heard many similar views. I don't know to what extent I need to repeat my response. For this session, many deputations have talked about the manning ratio, the adequacy of space and so on and so forth, and facilities. The ratio is 1.8 for 0 to 2. We all understand that the manning ratios are low. If we change from 1 to 8 to 1 to 6, it's an increase of by 1/3. We need to observe the extent of improvement. Other countries have better manning ratio, and I believe the care provided will be better, and it's good for child development. But we need to think about how. If we increase the space entitlement, then perhaps there will be insufficient space for carers to work and to rest. The schedule accommodation that we have now, well, I couldn't remember the name. It has to be updated to look at space entitlement and for projects to be developed on private land. We believe such projects can enable us to have more childcare centers. And we'll take this opportunity to improve the schedule of accommodation. We've heard from some deputations views on supervisors and also the grant system, which is a lump sum grant for more the service recipients. There will be one level, and for fewer recipients, there will be another level. This has to do with the way of modes of operation. We need to look into how we may introduce changes. We know that lump sum grant is a controversial mode of financial subsidy. We should think about the steps that we can take. Perhaps this is the right time to take the first step first. The improvements mentioned in the policy address will be something for the next financial year. And what will happen after this step is taken, we welcome views. And there are comments that home-based carers and mutual help childcare service should be expanded. There are a few enhancements mentioned in the policy address. Please don't misunderstand the government. We don't want to close all the mutual help childcare facilities. It's just that we want to make the best use of these facilities to provide better service. One of the directions we may consider is to do something for those in kindergartens aged 3 to 6. Understand some of the service providers think that long kindergarten classes may be better. We would further explore this with the Bureau's concern. but however we may do, I just don't see that in the coming few years we'll be able to provide a sufficient number of places in kindergartens with long hours, and that would enable every kindergarten pupils to be admitted to such kindergarten. That's just not possible. I think we do have a responsibility in looking at how we can provide childcare service to different families. So how can we help the kindergartens and the childcare centers, better services to parents? Well, this we will certainly be take into account. For those who have attended this hearing, well, they were fortunate in the sense that after waiting for some time, they were able to get a place. At present, the waiting time is a very serious situation. Those who have spoken waited for some time, and they managed to get the places they need. We would like to help offer more centers. We also understand that the cost is high. The subsidy level will increase from 25% to 40%, partly because, or mainly because of the increase in manpower. It would be difficult to see substantial reduction in fees. We'll see how we can further introduce fee remission schemes to help the families with medium or middle or higher income levels. But that will still take some time to realize. Just one word. Many deputations have talked about the manning ratio and also the lack of funding for a clerk. Well, this is related to funding mode. We'll look into these issues. Childcare centers are not kindergartens. Some kindergartens have very different sizes. For childcare centers, there are fewer children, say 100 or so. After improving the manning ratio for 0 to 2, 2 to 3 age group, there will be more carers, about 30%. One is from 14 to 11, the other is from 8 to 6. We have to find ways to offer more support to frontline workers. All right, it's now the members' time to raise questions. Dr. Fernando Chiu-hung, you are the first. It seems that the first is going to be the last as well. First of all, I'd like to thank all the colleagues and all the parents who have shown concern about childcare services. We seldom see so many recipients of services coming forward to speak. Although the Secretary referred to these people as fortunate people, they might be fortunate and still they find the time to come to tell us what they think about the services. You can see that these services are so urgently and the need is so much. I'm moved by what Mr. Fung has said, that you cry when you heard that there was no place available. So the situation is so serious. Nothing to celebrate about, in my view. Some parents had to enroll when what they have only got was the ultrasound scan of their babies. That's not the way to lead the world. For services rendered to those to children aged 0 to 3, we still don't see a clear direction. You have an objective that by 2031 certain things would happen, but what would happen to the young families and children in the coming future? No answer has been given. On manning ratio and facilities and outdoor space mentioned by some deputations, we have more than 200 kindergartens with close out now, this is a disaster. And the Secretary indicates that you will take another look at the funding mode and on how to improve the schedule of accommodation. I don't know whether it's just talk or whether there's a determination to make changes, to make improvements. Do we have a clear roadmap and a timetable? Will stakeholders be allowed to take part in the process? If that's what you have in mind, say so clearly. When members of the public or legislators mention problems, usually the answer would say that we would carry out a review, we will take another look. But actually the review is always ongoing, and all they are doing is to continue to do what they are doing. For example, for fee remission scheme, do you have a clear timetable? When will it be completed? When would there be new proposals? And the question is that we are talking about financial help. Even with 2 working parents, if we look at the medium income, the level $18,000 a month per working parent. If they have 2 children, they cannot afford the fees of over $10,000 in order to get the services they need. It's just impossible. And the report has ignored statutory requirements. For mutual health service is exempted. Home-based carers, if there are fewer than 5 children cared for, is also exempted. For the after-school, the kindergarten childcare service is also exempted. I think this is a loophole that we must be reviewed. And I also like to thank Pathfinders referring to the needs of foreign domestic helpers. We have more than 300,000 foreign domestic helpers working in Hong Kong. They help our families to care for their children. Many of them are in age-bearing age group. They may give birth to babies in Hong Kong, but their childcare needs are not addressed. According to Pathfinders, some of the babies are stranded in hospitals, even acute hospitals, because childcare is not available to these babies. I would like to answer Dr. Fernando Cheung's questions. So some of the questions have been answered by my response for more than 3 times already, so I won't repeat those. On the question of school remission scheme, we're going to conduct a review. It will be done in the coming year. From review to the provision of resources, we need some time. As for the review of the schedule of accommodation, it would be embarked on shortly. And of course, in doing this, we will need to take to stakeholders. There's no escape from that requirement. As for other questions, I believe I already answered them more than once. What about foreign domestic helpers and statutory regulation system? I haven't heard any response. Well, actually, I've answered the questions in the other session. On the question of law and regulation, this is the first time that we have heard that people would like us to review the law. Yet there's a need, of course, to update, to move ahead with the times. I cannot give any concrete response now, as Bureau Secretary, the actual work is not done by the Secretary himself. So I cannot give a more definite answer than what I have done today. All right, perhaps you can address this issue again concerning the 4th fourth question on fee remission scheme. You are going to announce the improvements within the coming year? No, I was talking about exploring the issues. How long would that take? You need time. So when can we expect some progress that you can bring back to talk to this panel? I know members need to answer need to ask some questions, but it would be somewhat difficult for me to keep repeating past answers. As let me say again, I would like to explore the issue of improving the fee remission scheme within the coming year. Well, we don't want to see questions repeated again and again, but the problems keep recurring. That's why. So Dr. CHEUNG, Fernando CHEUNG, they would do some explorations. It would happen in the coming year in terms of the fee remission scheme. Has this addressed your questions or not quite so? Well, of course, we need to do the exploration of the issues, but how long would that take? We don't know whether there will be some results coming out from that exploration. And the Secretary is not even promising that there would definitely be improvements. This is somewhat unsettling, and I believe parents are concerned rightly, because we have the numbers. We know how expensive the cost is, and also the subsidy level will increase from 20% to 40%, which is a good thing. But it will be offset significantly by the improvement in manpower, and the reduction of fees will be rather minor, as the Secretary has admitted. Of course, these people are fortunate in the sense that they managed to get the places they need, but it's costly. So how quickly can we do something to address their financial needs? It seems that the Secretary is still not very patient in saying that the question has been asked and answered many times. All right, if he cannot give us an answer, we may want to keep on asking. I hope one day they will listen to us. Yeah, your questions will be recorded by the Secretariat. I thank the deputations for coming to attend this very challenging public hearing. You all play a useful part. And we have heard from the Secretary what will happen, and we hope that the explorations will be as quickly as possible, so that we can address issues such as the financial burdens in the form of school fees, and also the manning ratio. I thank all deputations and the government for attending our meeting. If there's nothing under AOB, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.